All right. So, are you selling on Amazon in Canada and you're concerned about some of these new inventory restrictions? Where is it all coming from? Well, I wanted to basically do this video just to share with you some of my insights into it. So, I did a video about a month ago, which you can find right here, where basically what I did was I walked through. It was a new rule at the time. I knew it to be at the, I think I said in the video, at the SKU level, though it was technically the ASIN level, because as someone pointed out in the comments, you could have multiple SKUs for the same ASIN, and Amazon's the limit of 75 units was per ASIN. And that was on new products. Now, my point in that video was, if you're doing 10-20% of the sales in Canada, and the similar policy in the US was 200. Even at the holiday season, 75 is actually fairly generous as a proportion. But what I think was come as a shock to many of us is there's a few things with how the inventory number seems to have been reached for accounts that have been selling in 9 months, was the answer someone at seller support had given me. So I want to go through some of what people had to say, and kind of piecemeal some of the things that I've heard from folks saying, as well as some of what I've seen behind the scenes. And so if somebody from Amazon happens to be watching this would be great if some of the inventory limits can be opened up. So what I will just say here real quick is, if you're watching this and you're frustrated, just one thing I've kind of come to learn now, selling on Amazon for almost 6 years since I made my first sale on Amazon. So for almost 6 years, I've noticed sometimes changes get made and no change is ever permanent. So a lot of times changes which seem to be incentivizing sending in less inventory at a time sometimes swing the pendulum too far one way, and then they kind of swing it back. And so I've noticed that both with how punitive certain IPI scores might be, or certain programs, or the minimum threshold for IPI maybe they raise it too high and then they bring it down, or other rules like that. And so sometimes it's a temporary thing just because it's holiday season and they just have to kind of make room, and there's a legitimate reason why. Sometimes there's a pandemic and everything's changed, or in Canada, they had to close down one of their major fulfillment centers in Brampton, Ontario for 2 weeks. And that was, I think, pretty much unannounced. Maybe Amazon knew and they were reading the tea leaves and kind of knew something was happening. Maybe that's why some of these changes happened before that, but who knows? But anyway, let's go ahead and get into it here. We're going to share with you what others are saying, what I've seen, as well as some ways I think that we can manage this. Because at the end of the day, it's not about the way the wind blows. It's about we're able to capture that wind and set our sails accordingly. So on that video, someone had mentioned that the 75 SKUs per unit, and then she had mentioned 1,200 in total. She's the only person I've seen say 1,200 units was how many she was able to send in. Then this next person here says, I sent in my second shipment to Canada and they limit 200 units in total inventory. We'll get into that here in just a moment and where I think that's coming from. I have seen that 200 seems to be a magical number, although it's not consistent. I'll just say that. So someone else said that they have a 15% of their US sales in Canada, which is a pretty good, healthy number. This is what they had last year. The problem is that now they can only send in 560 units, although they have 1,500 in stock. And so they said they're unfortunately going to run out. It takes 2 months to get from the sea, coming from Italy. So they're saying it's going to bring them down to 5%. I don't know that I would count myself out that far. So if you're watching this, I think there's ways to manage this, and we'll go over those here in just a moment. But what I'm seeing for other folks is, I'm just going to show you mine. So I had to do a little bit of clearing out of products. So they seem to be looking at a historical trend, and I don't know how far back they've been going with the historicity, the historicalness of it all. But basically, I'm not 100% sure even how they came up with the number of 221 units in stock, because I'm pretty sure I have more than that. But I was only able to send in 774. And some of that is the reason I'm kind of low there, is I had a lot of popular products run out because my holiday season went a whole lot better than I thought it would. But I've been out pretty much. And so with delays after Chinese New Year and stuff like that, I was just about to send stuff in. Then all of a sudden I could send in like 20 units at the time. It was crazy. So um, I'll go over I'll cover this a little bit more in some of the strategies, but I did clear out some low selling things. I think I was starting to just pay um, long-term storage fees for. So sometimes it's good just to do that even in the US. So then next up, this is a client who has the 200 limit, and that seems to be something we see often. Now this client actually, he has 2 accounts totally approved by seller support, but both accounts have this 200 limit, which is kind of crazy. And then someone else, another client I'm working with, has unlimited. He can send it as much as he wants. That's great. Now it's still 75 per unit, but for him, that's totally fine. And then I have another client who he has no inventory in Canada. And this is saying he has 315 of 200 units taken up. And all that we could figure out was NARF. And so he has NARF, and we even took him off of all the NARF SKUs, and he still had some in there, still had some products showing up, even though NARF technically isn't inventory in Canada. It shows his inventory in the US. In fact, we went to his daily inventory history report, and he had like 1 sellable unit in Canada. And probably what happened was somebody purchased the product via NARF, and then they just returned it, and Amazon just stored it in their warehouse. I could see how that would happen. So he has 1 sellable unit, not 300, or even after we played around with this, it was like 200 and something. It was still over. So he was over his allowable of 200, and voila, we were able to create a dummy shipment of 300 units. And we even got to the point of being able to send in, or at least to the point where they would assign the warehouse. Because as I'm sure you might be familiar, and if you're not, usually if you get hung up with quantity limits, it stops you before you even are able to put in a quantity. So if you can imagine, if you're creating a shipment where you would, select the SKUs you want to send in, and then you get to the page where there's, a list of all your products that you're sending in, and then there's a box where you can put in a number for all of them. Usually that's where it blocks you. And so if you put a number that takes you over the threshold, it gives you a warning message. And so usually you can't get there. He was able to do that. Now, the client who had 200, he was not able to do. He wasn't able to send in more than 200. Once I put in a number that was for a dummy shipment that was above 201 or 201 or more, he was no longer able to send an inventory. So what seems to be the common denominator with a lot of people that are seeing 200, I could be totally wrong. They either had super slow sales in Canada historically, or they were in NARF. And so NARF is almost always going to be slower sales than what you would have with local inventory. So, people talk about maybe they get 1 or 2% bump in sales by selling a NARF. I was talking to somebody the other day saying doesn't even think he gets 1% bump in sales from NARF. I think what's happening is Canadian customers are getting more and more savvy to look for that on listings. Like, oh, this product's available for sale. Oh, but I got to wait like a week or two to get it from the US and pay duties and extra shipping. And they're like, I don't want to do that. And they can buy something else that just magically shows up to their doorstep 2 days later. So which do you think they're going to pick? And they don't have to pay duties and wait longer. It's coming from somewhere else in Canada. So generally people, even though it doesn't say this is FBA inventory versus NARF, they kind of know. So just they're incentivized to get the right, or to get an FBA inventory. So NARF is slow, point being. So if you have 9 or more months on NARF, they seem to be giving you 200 months or 200 units to send in, even though it's apples and oranges. You sold 200 apples, we're going to let you send, or you didn't sell many apples, so we're going to only let you send in 200 oranges. Like, it's not the same. Maybe oranges are more popular, which without fail, almost everyone I've seen, if they send a product NARF versus sending it in local inventory, they almost always get a huge bump with local inventory versus NARF. So just throwing that out there. So you'd think with that logic that Amazon would let them increase, but it seems like 200 seems to be this magical threshold. And that person who had unlimited, he was not in NARF as far as I could. Yeah, because we created all of his listings. There was no listings already in there. So there are ways to manage this. So this reminds me a lot of last year. So last year was kind of a reset year for a lot of us selling on Amazon in the US. You may recall, for a lot of us, we couldn't even send goods into a warehouse for a certain period of time. Maybe you could. That's great. I couldn't. And I know a lot of people were in that bucket. And so a lot of people, even if things were going well, there's still quantity limits and all this other stuff. And Amazon was figuring it out, and they got better at it. And I think their algorithms got better, because at the end of the day, they want to make sales. They're not in this to get sellers. They're in this to make money. And so sometimes they have to make decisions that we don't like, but in the long term, these things tend to figure themselves out. But in the middle of it, we don't necessarily all just want to wait. But the thing you can do is send in more shipments. So basically send in more often. Send in what you can send in. Focus on the ones that are selling, or if you're not selling in Amazon in Canada yet, focus on the ones that maybe will get that inventory sales moving, like the ones you think have the best sales potential. And oftentimes it's the ones that are the best sellers in the US too. So if you're selling 1,000 SKUs, maybe send in 20 of them and like 10 units each, and see what happens. And then as time goes on, hopefully the algorithm starts giving you more. As you have history, the algorithm gives you more allowable inventory to send in. I can't say that 100% for sure is what's going to happen, but that would only make sense. Another thing you could do is find a warehouse in Canada. There are warehouses in Canada that do this type of things. So I don't have a suggested one, but if you have one, please consider leaving it in a comment down below. If it's commercial spam, I will delete it. But if you have good history working with one, please consider leaving it in the comment section down below, so other people can know, like, oh, okay, I've used XYZ warehouse in Canada. They're familiar with, how to send stuff into Amazon or whatever. So, if you're sending in 1,000 units and you can only send in 200, then the other 800 maybe can stay on the shelves at that warehouse. And then when it's time to send in, you could have them send in another 200 and another 200. Or you could have the same thing happen with the warehouse in the US. So it's just, you got to get a little creative with it. But oftentimes the math of being up and running is still better than not. Then the next thing you can do is, try sending anyway, or create removal orders, or see if you have any NARF listings that seem to be adding up to that doesn't seem to be consistently happening. But if you do have NARF inventory that seems to be hitting your Canadian inventory, you can always check the daily inventory report and just filter by CA or filter by US as the location. That'll tell you what inventory you have where, because if you're in NARF, sometimes it can be hard trying to figure that out. But try creating a shipment, even if it's a dummy shipment, just see what happens. Or do what I did and remove some product. I realized, I was like, man, I probably should have done this a long time ago. I had stuff that I think had been in there for probably a couple of years, and gosh knows what I was paying. So, getting rid of some of the stuff that wasn't moving was probably a beneficial thing for me. It seemed to give me more space after that. I don't know. That's more of a side note. Then ask for more. So the client had 2 accounts. We put in support tickets for both of them. One of them, Amazon came back and said, no, we're not entertaining those requests. And the next one came back and said, if you would like us to consider it, we generally don't increase inventory storage limits, but this is the information we need if you want us to consider it. So I'm like, oh, so you're saying there's a chance. So we might do that. So you can always ask. There's a good chance they'll say no, but other than the 5 minutes it took you to, log into the Seller Central, go to help, type it out, what your request is. That's about what you have invested versus they might say yes. So worst case scenario, they say no, and maybe just upsets you for a moment. And then you would just say, I'll take a deep breath and we move on. But at least you asked. So that could be another thing you could do. And then just remember, this too shall pass. I've been selling, like I was saying at the beginning, I've been selling on Amazon for a long time. And 6 years is like infinite in Amazon time. But I've seen a lot of these changes come and go. And so it can be frustrating in the moment, but just have faith that things are going to work out. And so Amazon's wants the sales. And so when they have lots of stock outs, who does that hurt? Them, their bottom line. Yes, it hurts you, but keep in mind, this is one of these situations where it's not like you're stuck and everyone else is not in the same boat. Yeah, your situation might be a little different. Like the one person that said, they had 1,500 units in stock, but they're only allowed to send in 500, so they can't send it anymore. So maybe they just have to get creative with removal orders or multi-channel fulfillment orders, whatever makes more sense. And send some of that stuff back to a third-party warehouse. I mean, you just got to get creative. Those of us who are willing to get creative and do things that others won't do will get the results long-term. And so now is still a phenomenal time to sell on Amazon in Canada. So one of the things seller support did tell me, I will say this, is that they're increasing I think they said 50%. Don't quote me on that, but I want to say they said by Q4, they will have 50% more space in Canada. And so that's pretty significant. And so they're working on it. It's not like they're like, oh, I just want to tell sellers you can't send in stuff. It's not like there's a team that's incentivized for how do we really, get to those sellers. Let's not let them send in stock in Canada. Like, let's do that. Like, that's not how it works. They want to make the sales and they need inventory to make the sales. So that's just my 2 cents there. So I know it can be frustrating, but if you want to talk to someone who, sells internationally and has helped other folks do it, you can head on over to maximizingecommerce.com/help. Pull it up here real quick, and I'd be more than happy to help you out. And so this is one of these situations where you can book a one-on-one consulting session with me, someone who sells in multiple Amazon marketplaces, and I help people with a variety of services, either to launch internationally or just make sure they're doing things the way they should be doing it, or just answering their questions about selling internationally. So if I can help you, maximizingecommerce.com/help, you can purchase an hour of consulting time, and then it'll take you to a page where you can book time on my calendar right then and there. And so if that's for you, great. If not, no worries. So either way, I hope this video has been helpful for you. So if you could consider smashing that like button, as well as also commenting down below and subscribing to this channel if you're not already subscribed. If I can talk, I'm starting to lose my voice. So anyway, I wish you the best in your e-commerce journey. Take care.